The doctor warned her not to have this baby, but she didn't listen. When Alexis Fretz was 30 years old and 19 weeks pregnant, she began to bleed. Concerned but not alarmed, she called her midwife, who advised her to go to the emergency room just to make sure everything is okay. She was in the waiting room with husband Joshua in hospital in Como, Indiana, when she began to feel pain in her abdomen. At 6 p.m., a nurse came and gave me 3 glasses of water and told me to drink up for an ultrasound. And then she left. I bought on the TV and started watching House Hunters. I was assuming I wouldn't be able to finish the 30 minutes episode because they would come and get me, but I was very wrong. A few minutes after 6 p.m., I started to feel a few twinges of pain. By the end of the half hour, so I know I was in labor. Initially, the nurses were skeptical and at 7 p.m., she was taken for ultrasound. The ultrasound technician was able to find a heartbeat, but afterwards, when Alexis went to the bathroom, she was still bleeding and her contractions were intensifying. Having been through labor twice before with her 2 daughters, she knew what was happening. At this point, there was no break between the contractions. Just as one finished, another would start. I knew that I was at the end. I didn't give up hope, but in my heart of hearts, I knew that I was losing my baby. At some point, the PA came and said, "Your fetus is still viable." I seriously wanted to slap her. When the doctor checked me and sat down beside me on the bed and told me that we are going to be delivering our baby, it was the first that anyone had called him a baby. I immediately started bawling and asking if there was any other option. I was fully dilated and my water was blogging. So there was no other option at this point. Walter was breech, so we were waiting on my water. Let nature progress at its own pace. I don't remember what time I started pushing, but I was not feeling the contractions anymore after my water broke, so I did have to push several times to get his tiny body out. He was born at 9:42 p.m. and was handed up to me as soon as his cord was clamped. I was crying so hard at this point, but he was perfect. He was fully formed and everything was there. I could see his heart beating and his tiny chest. Just when I bathed, held him and cried over him and looked over perfect tiny son. Alexis is a photographer, and she happened to have her camera gear in her car for a wedding she was supposed to shoot. The following day, Joshua decided to go and get her camera. I'm so very glad that Joshua did that. At first, I didn't want any photos, but they were the only thing I have to look back on now. I don't understand why the Lord took him home, but I have to trust in His perfect timing. I may never know why, but it's comfort to know where He is and that I will see Him again. In His short life of just a few minutes, He has touched more lives than I ever could have imagined. I'm still in shock at how much his photos have been shared and commented on, she said. The photographs have opened discussions surrounding miscarriage, with Alexis and Joshua's story being shared all over the world by moms, follow bloggers, support the group, and families who have lost children over their own. The response is not necessarily surprising. In America, where Alexis is from, almost 1 million women miscarry their babies each year. In Australia, 1 in 5 women miscarry. While the Fretz family are glad their loss has opened up in a new form of dialogue, it was an unintentional outcome to share Walter's story. When we returned from our trip to Indiana without a pregnant belly or baby in my arms, I don't want to have to explain over and over again what happened. My hope was that by writing it down, it would draw the circle of our small town to help lessen my pain in having to retell it. I never had any intention or thought that it would go viral like it did. Most of the responses have been very positive. Many have seen Walter's photos and are shocked at how developed he was at just 19 weeks. Just because the child within cannot be seen by us doesn't mean that it's a blob of cells. Walter's was perfectly formed and very active in womb. If he had just a few short more weeks, he would have had a fighting chance at life. He has struck up many debates in the pro-life and the pro-choice circles. Again, that was never my intent. But I'm glad that he has made people rethink their status on this topic. I've also received so many emails from women who have told me they have never heard of a situation like their own. Preterm labor and infant loss is not something the public wants to talk about. To most people, it's not a big deal. You just try again for another baby, so they pretend it never happened and go on their lives while the mother and family are left in a pile of grief. They don't know how to deal with it. It's also very common for medical staff to take these babies away and dispose of them as medical waste. So many mothers never get to see or hold their babies, or even know if it was a boy or a girl. I'm heartbroken by the stories I've been hearing from people who weren't allowed to see their child, and seeing photos of any actual baby has brought healing and closure to some. I cannot say enough good things about my doctors and nurses that were there with me. They never once mentioned the word fetus. They prayed with me, cried with me, and were there for my every need. They encouraged us to hold and bond with our son. I held him, cuddled him. While his heart was beating, I held him to my heart, counted his toes, and kissed his tiny head. I will always cherish those memories that I have of him. Walter's parents, Lexi and Joshua Fretz, mom and dad, and 2 girls, who welcomed their 3rd daughter, Maya, this September, were excitedly waiting to arrival of their newest baby. She began experiencing spotting. This was not unusual for her during pregnancy. But when the spotting turned pink, she grew more concerned and called her midwife, who advised her to go to the ER. In the ER, several pregnant women came in after her and were taken straight to the maternity ward. But since Lexi was not yet 20 weeks, she was 19 weeks and 6 days. The hospital rules required her to stay in the ER. After about an hour, Lexi was able to hear her baby's heartbeat and felt relief. But as she waited for an ultrasound, Lexi began to feel the familiar pains of labor. Nearly 5 hours after arriving at the hospital, Lexi gave birth to her son, Walter Joshua Fretz, she writes. I was crying so hard at this point, but he was perfect. He was fully formed, and everything was there. I could see his heart beating in his tiny chest. Joshua and I both held him, and he cried over him and looked over our perfect tiny son. Clump of cells, tissues, just a fetus. These are common ways people who are pro-operation describe the problem in order to diminish the humanity of these new lives. But what people label the preborn is not what defends them. And that is proven by the life of one small child. In the summer of 2013, Walter Joshua Fretz was born at just 19 weeks gestation. He lived only moments, but his life has had a lasting impact. We still do not know why or how this happened. My midwife has talked personally with the OB doctor that treated me in Indiana. We will be getting all of the records and reports as they finish up the dictations and receive pathology reports back. It could have been cervix issue, maybe a result of some of the damage from Amy's birth. It could be preterm labor or a world of another thing, and we may never know why or how. There will be extra precautions taken if we can never get pregnant again. That is another area that is unknown. We went through so much and many trips to the specialist in Frederick to conceive Walter. So much still to think about.